Hey, good Thursday. This is the Chocolate Knox with your CrossPolitic Daily News Brief for Thursday, January 13th, 2022. Omicron came in like a... But it doesn't look like it's actually going to stay here. Well, at least not to the Dr. Bhakti Hansodi, who is the Director Center for Global Emergency Care Associate Professor of Emergency Medicine at Johns Hopkins.
What is your timeline of when Omicron ends?
So if you look at South Africa, I would have said 30 days. However, we've peaked much higher and our population is inherently different. So I'm really thinking months. I am not thinking that this is going to affect my summer plans. So I remain hopeful, right, that we're going to get past this peak soon.
So seriously, you think Omicron will be wiped away by the 4th of July?
Absolutely.
And how exactly does she know that?
So I think the fact is that when it peaks so quickly, we expect the fall to be just as significant. We're already seeing in New York and in Washington, D.C., that there is now a reduction in cases, which, it's very, very early, but it makes me hopeful. Plus, again, we're looking at South Africa and United Kingdom. So in United Kingdom, we've started seeing a taper. South Africa, from the first rise in the peak to the end, was around 30 days. So the viral transmission cycle here is smaller, which makes us more hopeful that this will end sooner.
But don't worry, there's still a chance that your summer plans might be interrupted because there's more letters in the Greek alphabet. Don't you worry one bit. U.S. inflation soared to 7% in the last year, the most it's been since 1982. Inflation jumped at its fastest pace in nearly 40 years last month, a 7% spike from a year earlier that is increasing household expenses, eating into wage gains, and heaping pressure on President Joe Biden. You got to figure out what they're going to do to fix this. Prices have been sharply rising for cars and gas and food and furniture as part of a rapid recovery from the pandemic recession that was fueled by vast infusions of government aid and emergency intervention by the feds. That's not all the problem, but they also slashed interest prices when they inserted that money in there. As Americans have ramped up their spending, supply chains have actually been squeezed by shortages of workers and raw materials. The Labor Department reported Wednesday that its measures of inflation that excluded volatile food and gas prices jumped 5.5% in December, the fastest such increase since 1991. Rising pricing have wiped out the healthy pay increase that many Americans have been receiving, making it harder for households, especially lower income families, to afford basic expenses. Polls show that inflation has actually started displacing even the coronavirus as a public concern, making it clear that the political threat it poses to President Biden and the congressional Democrats. A significant portion of inflation is still being driven by the pandemic, driven by mismatches between demand and supply. Used car prices have soared more than 37% over the past year, because new car production has been limited by shortages of the semiconductors that actually are the brain of your vehicle. The new car prices jumped 1% in December and have soared 11.8% in the past year. Clothing costs, 1.7% just in December, its second month of the sharp increase, and are 5.8% from a year ago. That's not good. There are some relief in the last month. Gas prices dropped 0.5% in December, yet those are still 50% higher than they were a year ago. Not too long ago, we actually had David Bahnsen on the show talking about his new book, There's No Free Lunch, which is a great book, by the way. But before he left, he gave us a clinic on inflation and deflation and what to think about them and how to understand them. And I think that we need to hear David Bahnsen again in this current time.
So inflation is too much money chasing too few goods and services. Disinflation, which is what America's been facing for many years, is when the price level is going higher but at a declining rate of growth. And deflation is when the price level is actually declining, which is what Japan has been facing for many years, and what America generally faces whenever it goes into a recession. Right now, we are the too much money chasing too few goods and services is an identity equation. There's two sides to it. And we are right now dealing with the too few goods and services. And most of it is related to just tremendously tragic things happening in society. 80,000 truck drivers that are no longer on the job. 3 million job quits in a particular month. A lot of those are people quitting to go to another job.
Sure.
But my point is, it was still on an absolute basis, a very, very high number, the highest we'd ever seen. So it is my belief that we have a significant problem right now with the supply level coming out of the COVID moment, where the demand is through the roof. And all of the people right now that are panicking about this were panicking a year ago for the exact opposite, saying, oh, no one's ever going to fly again. They're never going to drive again. They're never going to do this or that. And now they're saying, oh my gosh, what do we do? People are acting so human again. They're shopping and they're doing things and they're acting and they
need clothes.
So the demand of goods is through the roof, way past pre-COVID levels. The supply of goods is above pre-COVID levels, but significantly lower than the demand. That creates price escalations.
Okay.
The demand of services is not quite back to pre-COVID levels, but it's getting very close. And the supply of services is not back to pre-COVID levels. And more importantly, it is below the demand level. So you get price escalations when you don't have equilibrium between supply and demand. And that's what we're facing right now.
Man, that's so good. Not only did David talk about why we have inflation, but he also told us what we could actually do about it. Don't miss his key point here.
My point on this subject is that many people are tempted by the notion, I think Gabe and I talked about this on an earlier show sometime back, to believe that we have inflation because government's spending so much money. Well, I am a bigger critic of the money the government's spending than anybody making that claim, but it is not true. If it were true, they would be very, very happy because they would love to believe that they could spend excessively, force a lot of excessive indebtedness, and then inflate the problem away. Yeah. That would be a beautiful solution for the statists. They would not be concerned with any of what I just said. The problem has been for 20 plus years that they can't inflate it away because the law of diminishing return has taken away their ability to inflate away this problem. Hence 30 years of deflation in Japan, the most overly indebted society on planet Earth.
Right.
Post-financial crisis here in America, we had significant disinflation for 13 years, despite the fact that the Fed ran up $4 trillion on their balance sheet.
Right.
So we are living in a period right now where they underestimated demand, and we have significant nuanced events creating the supply problem. Some are supply chain, some are port, some are drivers. You know, there's all these different things, and it doesn't make for an easy Fox News soundbite. And so it's hard to elaborate with a level of precision that I think is important if I'm going to be a truth teller. But I'm very concerned about Christians that are saying, oh, this is, if the government spends money, it creates the inflation, and that's the problem. Even though I know they're well-meaning, and even though I want to criticize the government spending, the problem is that when that rate of inflation comes lower, which it's going to, the government will take it. They will say, oh, you thought this was going to happen, and instead this happened. I guess we can continue spending excessively because the runaway inflation you worried about didn't surface. We've seen it for 30 years now. And my belief is that we have got to focus on the supply side of the economy. Do I think this administration is going to come cut marginal tax rates? No, I do not. But a few months ago, they were very, very ready to increase marginal rates on personal income, on business income, and on investment income. All of those things are now basically off the table.
Yep.
And so but the deregulation necessary to boost the supply side is, there's a lot of things that can be done to help the problem. Not all of them are governmental. Not all of these problems are governmentally created and certainly not governmentally solved. Some of them are. So that's my kind of macroeconomic perspective. Yeah. And I'm happy to elaborate further if anyone wants to email more about it. This is sort of a hobby horse of mine.
You should be following David Bahnsen, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. Everything he does, you should be following him. If you're paying attention to the rippling economic effects happening to our nation right now, it really reads like the Old Testament, doesn't it? And we, being sons of Issachar, should know our Bibles enough to know the story that we're actually in and be able to say, oh, we need to repent. You toss on some sackcloth and ashes and then get to work. And that's just how simple it is. Really repent and get to work. Idaho Family Policy Center. I want to let all of you know about the Idaho Family Policy Center, or also known as IFPC. IFPC is currently the only explicitly Christian policy organization in Idaho politics. Pastor Toby Sumter and Israel Waitman serve on the board, and the president is Blaine Kinsadi. We actually have Blaine Kinsadi on the show before. He's a great guy. A member of our sister CREC church, also out in Kingston congregation down in Meridian. Blaine and IFPC have been leading the efforts to defund Planned Parenthood, end abortion in Idaho, and protect children from the transgendered agenda. Basically, Blaine is a really strategic voice in Idaho politics, and he represents many of the biblical and constitutional concerns in Boise. IFPC is a brand new ministry and is in such significant need of donation to help fund it. That's where you come in. I know we all have many commitments to other great ministries, but if you're particularly concerned about Idaho politics, this is one of the ways that you can have a very direct impact. Go to idahofamily.org to learn more and to make a donation. You can put this next article into what's it going to take for you to get your kids out of government schools folder. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona allegedly solicited the National School Board of Association letter comparing parents to domestic terrorists, according to the emails obtained by Parents Defending Education. Oh, gooey. Chip Slavin, then the intern executive director of NSBA, told the officers he was writing a letter to provide information to the White House from a request by the Secretary, Cardona. The emails show collaboration between the Department of Education, Department of Justice, and the National School Boards Association, which advocated for federal government to monitor, intervene, and in all the activities concerning parents regarding their children's education. A late September letter from the National School Board Association asked the Biden administration to use statutes such as the USA Patriot Act to stop threats and violence directed towards school board members over actions that could be the equivalent to the form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. That's according to the now deleted letter. Those soccer moms, ooh, Karens, yeah. American public schools, its education leaders are under an immediate threat, the National School Board Association wrote in the letter. The letter asked for federal law enforcement and other associates to deal with the growing number of soccer moms and threats of violence. Someone needs to tell these folks that riots and violence are actually, they're just the voice of the unheard. That's it. They're just the voice of the unheard. On top of requesting federal aid, of course, on top of requesting federal aid, the letter noted several issues related to school boards. Battlegrounds for culture wars over mask rules, COVID-19 vaccinations, schools reopening, critical race theory has been a big one, and remote learning. 4 days after the National School Board Associate letter was sent, the Attorney General Merrick Garland issued a memorandum on the call for the FBI to use its authority against parents who threaten or use violence against public school officials. That's great. Because those teachers are federal agents. The European Union regulators warned that frequent COVID-19 booster shots could adversely affect the immune response and may not actually be feasible. You don't say. Repeat booster doses every 4 months could eventually weaken the immune response and tire out people, according to the European Medicine Agency. Instead, countries should leave more time between booster programs and tie them to the onset of cold season each hemisphere, following the blueprint set out by the influenza vaccination strategies, the agency said. The advice comes as some countries consider the possibility of offering people second booster shots in a bid to provide further protection against the surging Omicron infections. Earlier this month, Israel became the first nation to start administering a second booster or fourth shot to those over 60. The UK has said that the boosters are providing good levels of protection and there is no need for a second booster shot at the moment, but they will review the data as it evolves. Boosters can be done once or maybe twice, but it's not something that we can think should be repeated consistently. That's Marco Carveri, the EMA head of biological health threats and vaccine strategy. He said this in a press briefing on Tuesday. Quote, "We need to think about how we can transition from the current pandemic setting to a more endemic setting." You mean kind of how I've been living my life this whole time, and anybody sane has been too, taking care of their own health? No thanks, Doc. I got this. If you haven't yet, go download the Fight Laugh Feast app. It's free. If you need a good deal, you can get it there, free app. And just by downloading our app, it actually helps us out a whole lot. And if you want to even help us out more, you can become a Fight Laugh Feast club member after you download the app. So help us be able to do this a lot more. Go download the app, become a club member, and fight outdated media and put the cross before our politics. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.